And we are live.
Wow, we are live. Hello, Timo.
Hello.
So I'm going to kick this off by just starting to say, good luck, have fun in this session, Timo.
I need luck today.
Don't we all always?
Yes, to some degree, that's true. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone who is joining us right now and will be joining us in the next few minutes and later in the session. And everyone who's watching this after the fact. We are here to talk about the data governance dilemma. Dun, dun, dun. We'll introduce the concept a little bit later. And we are going to talk about specifically also how we get out of it. I think that's the most important part about this session. But some problems are just such that they are worth spending some time on talking about the problem as well. So we are going to do that. We're going to share some war stories, Timo and I, on what we've seen in our experience, the challenges of scaling data quality, um, and the challenges involved in that, and sort of explore how data leaders can solve these problems. Both with, of course, culture shifts. No tool or software that you build will ever solve all of your problems, but culture changes can be supported and need to be supported with tools. So, hi, Nitin. Nice to see you, and thank you for joining us. And so we welcome questions in the comment sections, and we will do our best to answer them live or in the comments or after the fact later. So this was just a little bit of a housekeeping. Now that we have some people flying in or joining and waving in, hi there. We would love to see you post like a flag or a name of the city or a country that you're in also. We love to see where the people are that we're talking
Or
to.
the team you're rooting for during the Euros.
Ooh, we're just turning this into a flaming hot topic then. Okay, that's exciting. I like that, Timo. But now that we've sort of quickly covered that, let's just dive into intros. I will do a very short just name of myself and then throw it over to you, Timo. I am Steph. I'm technically named Stefania. So I'm Stefania Olafsdottir. I am the CEO and co-founder of Avo. I've been in data science for 13, 14 something years. And my personal passion is to create a world with fewer miserable data scientists. And that is one of the reasons that we started Avo, who helps companies guarantee data quality upstream so that people aren't stuck in downstream patching data and reactive damage control, but are actually situated in the proactive data management situation. But there are still so many challenges to attack. And so I'm really excited about talking about those today. So over to you, Timo. Tell us who you are.
So many challenges to attack and so few time left to do that. Okay, hi, I'm Timo Dechau. I lived half of my life in product. So I was building products for quite a long time. And this also brought me to data because especially like product analytics data can be pretty powerful, but can be pretty painful if it's faulty and cannot, then definitely you get the opposite. So when you have good data, you can speed up your product decision. You can be more confident with your product decisions. But if you don't have this good data, of course, or if the data, you think you have good data, but it's not actually good, you get the opposite. And I think this is also like why the topic of governance was, even like in the earliest setups, always like one of the most important ones on different kind of levels. And we might touch some today. For the last 8 years now, I basically do the same thing, but from, let's say, the data side. So I'm helping companies to create better product analytics setups. And of course, like we talk a lot about data governance because one of the it's part of the dilemma is like, so you build something great, you build a great product, we build a great setup to track the data, and then life goes on, often just for 3 or 4 weeks, and we already have introduced our first issues again. And yeah, exactly. And we don't have happy data scientists anymore. So they're all pretty sad for several reasons. And one is like data quality. And so, yeah, I think this is like, I guess, the dilemma we want to talk. I think the interesting thing is about dilemma is like, I think dilemma by concept cannot be solved, but we are still trying to solve it today. So at least like we want to show that. So
Yes, exactly. And this, I think, is actually a great segue into some questions that we sort of prepared and thought of to start this conversation. And I think like one of the most important questions to sort of talk about or realize is that while data governance and data quality is a huge challenge even for tiny teams, there is something also that happens at scale. So let's just throw the ball over to you, Timo, for why is data governance at scale different from managing data quality for a smaller team or within a smaller team?
yeah, I think it has different aspects. I think the first one that maybe most of the people in the audience can relate to is there are much more people involved. And as we know, the more people are involved, the more chaos basically is created by default. And it's not even just like more and more people, it's also like different kind of organizations, different kind of cultures. So sometimes even in everyone who worked in bigger organization knows that you can have different kind of, let's say, teams who, let's say, technically work on the same thing or contribute to the same thing, but approach things slightly different. And data quality is a lot about standardization and yeah, in the end, like establishing a standard and roll it out. And of course, like the more interest you have on the table, the harder this gets. And so I even saw this in let's say in some companies where in the end you have a committee, also like a group of people who basically makes this governance kind of decisions, trying to solve this for everyone. And so I think the first problem is really like this, that you have more people involved and you just have more interest involved in this whole thing. Small startup, you would assume, let's say 10 people, everyone is basically aligned what comes down to the interest. So like, yeah, you would think. So this is like, I disclaimed it like this. So, but it's at least it's easier. So you bring 10 people or 8 people into the room, you figure it out, you move on. In a, let's say, bigger organization, technically you have to bring 40 people in a room and try to figure it out. And I think this is definitely, at least from my experience, this is part one that makes it complicated. Maybe a second one, and then I would ask you what your experience was there. But the second one is then, of course, like technical. So because global organization doesn't mean, okay, you have totally different kind of teams. We often have local markets, and we have maybe even like a range of different kind of products. So the technical setups for all these different kind of products, local markets, and so on can be totally different. So some local markets work with agencies. Other one has their own small development teams. Maybe the big HQ works with a lead agency and so on. So you have this, even like on a technical implementation side, you have this vast different kind of field and environment that that just creates chaos by default, and it's super hard basically to get aligned. So I think this is like, for my feeling at least, the initial scaling problem if you scale up data governance of this area.
I think these are. I mean, these hit the nail on the head from my perspective. Because you asked me what do I think? I think if we just sort of double click a little bit on this, I think maybe it's a third angle. Maybe it's just sort of like another angle on the same things that you've pointed out. Is there are, as the teams scale and the company scales, you grow different needs from the same data. You know, a little bit. And so you end up, and if we're now looking only at event data, which I think, I mean, obviously data quality is such a huge topic, and we need to look at it holistically. But event-based data from product experience is this huge beast on its own, and it's worth it to sort of hone in on that data for this conversation. And if I'm now thinking only about that and looking at like a specific event, like back at QuizUp, for example, we had a crucial event called Game Started. And it's used for so many different purposes. And so there are so many different stakeholders that rely on this event being accurate for their use case. But there are also so many different contributors to just the single event that might send it from another location in the app, or might need to add a different type of a property to it or something like that. And this is just on the event level and on the property level, and then you scale that up also to the metric layer, which is, how do people define day one retention? How do people define active users? How do people define a user even? And all those just philosophical questions, they become much more difficult as you have more groups leveraging the data as data consumers and contributing to the data as data producers. And so I think it all boils down to the same problem as I remember I interviewed Eric Bernhardsson at some point in the right track, and he was sort of calling out this the importance of having sort of data people embedded in a team, and allowing domains to own their own data and things like that. And he talked about this, the scaling dilemma of this is like, the least amount of sync is required when you just have one person. Just one person working on this one thing. She's the data producer and the data consumer, and she just does the whole thing. She understands how it works. Then you have within a single team, but a bunch of people, and they are sort of, you have to sync a little bit, but it's like the lag time of the insight and the knowledge is maybe in days, maybe hours or days. And then you go between teams, and then maybe all of a sudden you're talking about like weeks of delay of sync, just because you have to wait for the next like cross-team meeting, and then this team lead brings this thing up and to that team. There are just these things. Obviously, we have asynchronous communication for these between teams, but this is the level of complexity that we're talking about, I think, and it obviously applies to data at scale as well. So. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So I think this is a good segue into defining the data governance dilemma, and then talking a little bit about what makes it challenging. I will set the stage a little bit for this. So we've been talking about this concept a little bit at Avo for a really long time, and very recently started sort of framing it as this, the data governance dilemma. And kudos to Simon for coming up with that, I think. Or maybe Clara, maybe that dynamic duo that always comes up with great phrases together. It's an impossible choice of choosing between moving fast with broken data or enforcing data governance processes that slow everything down. And the interesting thing here is, in both of those cases, the result is slowness, but just on different ends. So in the move fast with broken data, we're saying each team can move fast and ship their product with analytics implemented fast. But then when they started to try to use it, and let alone when other people start to try to use the data that they created, then everything becomes really slow and cumbersome, and nobody knows what it means, and it's not aligned with the rest of the org or something. But in the other case, you sort of enforce this governance process, and that slows everything down, and the product team is sort of being forced into moving in the speed of the bottleneck of the data governance team, or there's not necessarily even a data governance team there. It's just some random person or a team that has sort of accidentally had to take the responsibility for data governance. So that's a little bit what that means. What makes this so challenging? What makes this challenging, Timo?
I think so there's even an alternative to let's say the last example. So product team is blocked because they have to run it through the governance person or team. And so they do what every team does when it gets blocked. They basically create their own realities. So they just work beyond that. So they either they break the standards or they set up I saw different kind of versions of that. Sometimes I even saw they just implemented a new tracking system just for themselves. So they introduced a completely new tool, and when I asked them why, they said yeah, then we don't have to run it with the central team, so we can do whatever we want. Which to some degree is okay, until the point of time they bring a metric on the table, and no one has an idea where this stuff is coming from. So because they measure totally differently, and of course you cannot make decisions on that. So what makes it so hard? Why it's a dilemma. So I think, from my experience, software, you have the same thing. So software, you always let's say so you want to be fast, but then you might break things, like one of the famous Silicon Valley startups claim to say, don't say it anymore. So you always have to balance speed and quality. And so in theory, and this is the dilemma, is you cannot have one without degrading the other. So if you go for high quality, you slow down. If you go for speed, you basically reduce quality significantly.
Yeah, and both of them reduce speed.
This is actually true. So I never really thought about this, but in the end, it's true. So when I move fast, I screw up things because I redo them, I slow down, analyze this process, and so on. So the obvious decision would be we don't care about any kind of data. We just leave it. We trust our gut feeling and just go for it, which we all know is also maybe not the best solution. So it's really hard. You have these two things that by nature contradict each other. So and this is the tricky thing. It's also the trick. You have this in every area. So the interesting thing is how can you find something where you can increase both at the same time? So you increase speed, but on the other hand, you also increase quality. And I think because you mentioned it as well, it's we have even a third dimension in there. And this is still, how to call it? Maybe local preferences, call it like this. So this nasty thing that everyone knows is so I created tracking plans for really huge organizations, and we had meetings with 30 people in the same room. And if you discuss this, if you discuss single events with 30-40 people, you basically have a group of people where in the end you end up discussing really ridiculous things, or not ridiculous, they are important for a specific group within this group. But you're always trying to find common ground and so on, which is super hard. One solution always was to cut them off. You always introduce something where you say, okay, we don't go there. Yeah, maybe it's not so important for you, so we don't do this. But in the end, you create the same problem what I just described before. What will this local team do? So in worst case, they introduce another tracking tool to just track this, because for them it's important. And I think this is another dilemma. So it's important for the whole organization to keep it lean, but it's still very important for the local part to get this information, because they're just working on a specific feature and they just need to know it. And both are right, which makes
I think you hit the nail on the head with and it's really important to, I think, call this out. And I've recently, for example, had a great conversation with Vijay at Mixpanel about this, head of product at Mixpanel. He was calling out, and this is just every single conversation that I have also covers this, or this is an angle there, which is we need some sort of a global governance system for the data quality and for the system that we have in place, or for, for the naming conventions, for what you're allowed to do with data, where you're allowed to send it, what it should be structured like, all of these best practices, we need to sort of somehow enforce them, but maybe only for really important events, and allow sort of like a long tail of shitty data that nobody needs to really govern that much, because it's just meant to be used really quickly for this one release. Of course, like as data practitioners, I think probably most data practitioners have some form of OCD. I'm gonna
What is OCD?
What's it called? Obsessive compulsive, whatever. Obsess over things. Like needing things to be accurately accurate. Because that's what also makes us a little bit good at sort of detecting weird things in the data and being a detective, and then also being accurate enough that we can actually rely on the data that we have created. That means it's probably difficult for us sometimes, as the people who are meant to govern, to sort of let go a little bit. But I think this also brings us to, like, why is this always failing? What tools and processes have we tried to use, and have teams been trying to use, that have failed? And I'm gonna maybe talk about the last 5 to 10 years, because we have to remember that this is a fairly new problem for event-based data, because event-based data, beyond just page views, generic page views, it's fairly fresh. It's the state of the art today, so everyone needs to be obsessing over it and thinking about it, but it is a fairly fresh problem. So scaling that is obviously a very fresh problem, an inevitable fresh problem. But I think this angle of that like, we need accuracy and reliability, and we need a system, but we need people to be able to bypass the system, but only when they should be allowed to. So I guess a quick question over to you, Timo. What have tools and processes failed to address over the last 5 to 10 years? Why are we still facing this problem?
Yeah, first of all, because like the AI hasn't taken over yet, so we cannot really rely on fully, let's say, programmatic systems yet. So in the end, like, we still have humans involved, and I think what was often missing, I mean, it's like what you just described, I think, is the essential thing. So we have to have a good understanding, okay, what is really important. So I usually, like, when I talk with my clients, I say, okay, we have at least 2 levels. So level number 1 is like, this is the stuff that goes into reporting to your investors and to your management. This is super important. So we have to handle this differently, because like, if this fails, we are all in trouble. So then on the other hand, we have stuff that 3 people here just care about. And so if there's something fails, they will be a little bit angry and might not talk to us for 2 days. But it's like, we don't risk our business in this kind of thing. I think this is like the first thing. Always when I work with companies, they don't do this distinction. They always put everything, these 2 things, which are totally separate, into one bucket. I think this failed tooling-wise, even when it's not a tool, but it's like it's a process, or it's a procedure where it fails. And I think tooling-wise is like, to enable it, you need flexibility. So if I put my tracking plan in the spreadsheet, I cannot put in this spreadsheet that, of course, like, I can mark, okay, look, this is important, but my spreadsheet is not checking my implementation. So this is like the biggest problem. I mean, like, my biggest problem always, like, with any kind of, let's say, spreadsheet driven or other kind of driven monitoring or governance system is like, it's not connected to anything and it doesn't check. And so for me, we talked about this balancing speed and quality. I think the major ingredients for balancing speed and quality is testing and monitoring, and do this programmatically. So even myself, so I would say I tested 30 really big tracking setups in my life. And I think it's fine. I don't have to do 31st, because this is the nastiest job that you can have. It's super hard and it fails. So I even overlooked things. I mean, this is the tragedy of that. So when I do setups today, I go for automatic testing. Because like this is the only way where I can guarantee in the end, okay, we basically deliver what we have promised. And I think this is like the part that was missing from tooling for a long time when I got started. You're right. So I mean, it's like it's 10, roughly 10, 12 years on, we never really had. So we had spreadsheets, that's it, for a long time.
Exactly.
And it was good for setup, but never good for maintenance.
Yeah, I think that's a really good good summary. Good for setup, but never good for maintenance. Both because it has no direct. So spreadsheets spreadsheets don't scale because they don't continue to be the source of truth, and because there's no direct link to the actual implementation of the data. And what's interesting also, I think, about the spreadsheet is like we see what I've admired in the past, what people have done with spreadsheets has been they've actually set up checks, like spreadsheets that have built-in checks that people are following some protocols. So you can do a lot of elaborate stuff with spreadsheets, but that's where this is where they break. They are not connected to your implementation. That's where they break. They are such a power tool, but this is exactly where they break. And then I think other solutions have been JSON files and YAML files on Git. And then adding some linters to those to sort of check that you're following maybe some rules. I think historically, at least, the linters just have not been smart enough to detect what you need to do. You need to be really elaborate in your linting setup to do that. And I think the main problem with that setup, though, surprisingly, this was one of my biggest surprises when starting Avo. I always thought that we would be building solutions directly based on like Git and JSON files and things like that. But there's such a big don't feel comfortable in a place where YAML file.
Big surprise. Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so let's before we actually start, we're going today in Avo product. What we have with this product inspire people to help solve this problem, but also inspire you to take your home level or something like that. That mission is to a world where miserable data practices. And so I built out how to do it. I also love seeing people going beyond and building something internal. That's maybe not the spending their time on. Anyway, so let's go into some data. Do you think was the most clear example of a company with a great data team that struggled with data governance at scale?
Yeah, so I thought a little. I had different kind of projects where this stuff is happening, but I have one where it really was. I would say it was classic textbook. Whenever someone creates a textbook around it, because like I think it haven't been created yet. So I worked in for a big publishing group. So publishing group running different kind of magazines, moving into digital, so have now online magazines and so on. So they had digitally, they had a range of, let's say, print to digital converted, and then like I don't know, a new for younger generation, more feed driven. Then they had something with video, something with audio, and so on. So they had a vast different kind of range of different kind of websites, which in the end is fine. I mean, like let's say in some worlds it might be okay that everyone just does their stuff what works best for them. So because like in the end, I mean, video has different kind of requirements than, for example, classic article-based website. But the thing is like the group that was managing everything, they have to run a business, and they had two business models which were often implemented on one, sometimes just one, sometimes both. And this was on the one hand subscriptions, on the other hand ad revenue. And they wanted to see how it's evolving across the months. So this was extremely important for different kind of, let's say, teams in the central company, to forecast things, to plan things, to decide about budgets and so on. And they needed to have a overall glance across all the different kind of entities they were managing. And as you can already see, it's like, so someone was running videos, the other one has a website. In the end, they all created something about ad impressions. So, and the data team started out, so they were tasked to basically align everything. So they started out by just trying to clean up the mess every month. So collecting the data from all the different kind of entities, bringing it a little bit together. It was really like, it was so wasteful amount of time. They basically really had to figure out, okay, yeah, these views don't really fit because they implemented the event wrong. So we add let's say, we reduce it by 20%. So they had a crazy kind of setup. You cannot really show this to someone. And then on the other hand, so they're trying to solve this. And so they had anarchy, and they went full to the other side. So they take, okay, when we have anarchy, we have to bring control. And so they brought control, what we already discussed as well. So they said, look, we have now a data governance strategy. So these are the events that have to be implemented from all the different kind of websites within this kind of time frame. And we are checking everything. So this was their step first. Interestingly, it worked. So it took, of course, a bit longer than they planned, but interestingly, they got it implemented everywhere. It worked fine for the first month. Second month, it already failed again. Because like one website just deployed something new, someone did it differently, some developer kicked something out. And so then they went for the radical one, maybe the Empire Strikes Back version, to say everything has to go, every major release has to go through our department as well,
Right.
and we have to sign things off. Yeah, I think this is like if you have no chances anymore, you go for this. And of course, this then it solved the data quality problem, but it created something that I would say was even worse. Product releases were slowed down, and you could already see first signs of shadow data setups that teams were creating. And so for them, it was really, really important to find a middle ground in between that. So really and this, I think this sets the stage. And so we will show this in the tool, because like for me, it's always important to not just talk about the problem, but also like show how you can handle this. Because the problem is, this is hard to solve just by conventions, just by talking to people. You need to have a mix of culture and tools to achieve that. And so, because the idea were right, so we have 5 core metrics we have to cover. We need to get them covered. Everything else, do whatever you want. And so they just needed to find this kind of solution. And yeah. And for a long time, it was not even possible. So this is something which is really fairly new in Avo. So we were using this project already, Avo, but we were always looking for this. Hey, how can we enforce these 5 things, which are really important? And I was super happy to see that this is now arriving, because like for companies in this kind of situation, it can be really kind of a solution. And as I said, like from my experience, you need programmatic assistance with that, and we will show a little bit like in a second why it really helps.
Yeah. Okay. So this, I think, thank you so much for sharing this story. I think you sort of talked about the core of the problem from my perspective, which is that we really always need to introduce some sort of a governance system, but because the system is too rigid and difficult to work in, then the teams bypass it. And because the teams bypass it, the data team and some other folks are stuck patching up bad data in production. And then you start again at the top, which is you try to introduce a governance system. And then people bypass the system. And so it's a vicious cycle that you're stuck in, which is sort of this, I guess, maybe it's the twilight zone of the data dilemma. How can we sort of try to strike this balance between moving fast and governing our data? And so I think before actually So for everyone's information here that are here with us today, thank you all so much for being here with us today. I am actually handing over to Timo in a few minutes, not immediately though, to actually demo stuff in our product. And my favorite thing to do, one of my favorite things to do with Avo is actually to let other people run wild within the product, and sort of we're just there as observers. And I think this is probably something that everyone that's ever built a product agrees with me on. And so, but I do want to quickly set the stage for sort of what the problem is, and sort of introduce the stuff that we are working on and how we're thinking about it. So I will now share my screen, and it is going to be here. It's going to be this way, and it's going to be like this. Can you see my screen right now?
Now I can.
Perfect. And so just to set the stage here for what we have today, what Avo has today, and this is, again, this is, of course, a little bit about Avo, but, you know, I also want to just think about this as an inspiration to anyone who is working on this problem internally. Right. And so it sort of falls into these three categories of planning and preventing bad data. And this is a little bit around this sort of what is the perfect balance here of governance and letting people run free. And it very much relates to the data mesh principles, which some people are allergic to and some people are very aroused by. And so it's these four principles of how to build a great data culture. And it includes domain-driven or domain-oriented ownership of data, but it also includes federated governance of data, and it ideally encourages people, or it means that you should be thinking about your data as a product, which means it has stakeholders and it has to have usability and market. People internally want your product or whatever you want your data product to be. It has engineering feasibility and a business viability. So think about the data as a product is the third one. And then the fourth one is we are always building towards a self-serve data platform. And I think this fourth one is such a key in what we are trying to build towards, because when people think and talk about self-serve, they're typically talking and thinking about self-serve analytics. But from my perspective, it's very important to also talk and think about self-serve governance. And I think that is the key in what we are talking about here today. You know, we are talking about the ability to have a framework within which people can work fully self-serve governed. And so what we have already built for that today and have historically had in Avo is every company is working within a global namespace. That means events cannot have similar titles or duplicate titles, and the same for properties. You can't have the same name of a property describing various different things. It's built for collaboration, and it includes branded workflows, which is huge for this because historically, like we talked about, it's either through spreadsheets or it's through JSON files. And spreadsheets are human accessible, and JSON files on Git have branch workflows and source control, but we have merged them into one. And that's, I think, a key aspect to sort of distribution of this way of working. And then in the implementation phase, very important to have something like a type-safe code gen that really speeds up implementation, some sort of auto-generated instructions, and some sort of instant validation that you have implemented according to the spec, quote unquote. And then some sort of a way to find and fix the stuff that bypasses all of these checks, because you will always have accidents. That's just the way of the world, you know? And so we always want to have some system in place to be able to find and fix the stuff that goes past this. So that's what we have, and that's what we think about as like a tracking plan. But what we're now thinking about is making it feasible for large teams to operate within the same namespace, but still have different domains own different things. So what that means is domain-specific tracking plans. So, for example, the checkout team would only be looking at their own tracking plan, but they and they would be sort of everything would be sort of the experience would feel like they're just looking at their own tracking plan, but they're living in this wider world of a single namespace. And so we're supporting them to work within the entire organization, within the limitations of the organization, but they don't feel like they're being bogged down. And within that, and this is one of the things that we're going to demo today, they can create variants of events that every domain in the company is using, or other domains in the company is using. And they can create variants of those events and add required properties on those events without making them required on all of the other locations that those events are triggered from. And that's very huge because that's what enables us to have rigorous data structures, and not just like an event that has a lot of nullable properties because it's being sent from all of these different locations in code. And Timo will show more about that. And then domain-specific reviews is some things that are coming for us soon, and the event variants are sort of a part of what sort of enables that, and the ownership that we're working on towards that. And then the other angle of that is also what Timo will be demoing here. We're building it not only down here, but we're also actually extending it by adding sort of systemized governance in the layer here, removing human governance bottlenecks and empowering anyone to design consistent data. The challenge that we've seen here is that governors that don't want to be governors, they still don't want to trust people to do stuff in their tracking plan because most people don't read the manual. That's the problem. People don't read the manual on how they should do things. And so we will be also shipping some automated, way more elaborate guardrails than have historically existed in Avo and other solutions. And that's coming very soon. But the way further up vision as well that we're releasing now and that we already have live and that Timo will be literally demoing in a few minutes is multi-workspace organizations. So we already talked about what a single tracking plan looks like, and we are now migrating into a world where you have multiple schemas and multiple tracking plans. Each of them live in a single namespace, but you can sort of make sure they're working together and have some global requirements that apply to all of them. Use cases include airlines with multiple sub-airlines, subsidiaries. There are, a customer of ours, Delivery Hero, has acquired so many delivery companies in the past, and they all have their own. And then another use case is publishing. You have, publishing platforms that are publishing, multiple, they have like multiple websites for different things, and they have different teams behind those websites. So there are just a lot of use cases for this. And then we're making it feasible to enforce global requirements in order to leverage data from across an entire organization of groups that really eventually work independent from each other. So this, of course, is making me very, very excited, and this is what Timo will be demoing in a minute. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and hand the mic over to you, Timo.
It's like sitting here, and I just wanted to show something. So, okay, so because and it's just like what you said, what makes it so exciting for me, because like I worked exactly in these scenarios. So I think, I don't know, do you see the screen or do you have to enable it? I think you are the admins. Yeah, okay, perfect. So, okay, we take this example. So this is, of course, a prepared workspace. So we took the example of, we have an airline, or more like we have an, let's say, airline enterprise. And this airline enterprise is running different kind of airlines. And so the airlines, we made it pretty simple. So we have a high quality, high class airline that we are managing. We have, let's say, an accessible but still quality one. And then we have one with the lowest fares that you can already see up here. And so naturally, they are all airlines. So they do a lot of common things. So for example, as you can see here, people can book a flight. So this makes sense. So we want to have this across. And I'm right now so we have different kind of workspaces. And so I'm right now, so if you already use ours, you might see this. So I'm right now in the global requirement workspace so I'm in the global data team. So it fell into my lap that I'm now the one who has to, I became the governor. So I have to establish standards.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean, life happens. So sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And I definitely can say because we always make fun about it, that it can be a huge win. So I'm just trying to bring in the positive, because like the nice thing, which is also now in my hands, is like I can now really streamline our real, or let's say intraday reporting on flight books, because I enable it that is available from all the different kind of airlines that are reporting into one single bucket in the end. And I built this really nice report where everyone is working with. So it's my deepest goal to manage this. So one thing, if you have started to work with this, what you will see is like we now have some workspaces down here. And so the reason for this is like, as Steph just showed, like the global basically sits over everything, and these are the workspaces that are assigned to it. And we can now assign our standards to these workspaces. And
you can even, if you go now and click the Avo logo, then you can literally see the rollout status. If you go to merged branches in the upper there and click on and expand there, you can see that someone created a branch there. Someone created a branch called Flight Booked with this new event, and then pushed it into the subsidiaries. And you can see that the low fare airline has already merged the branch. The middle one, is already at least reviewed it. And then the top one, we might need to ping it someone about that, So I think that's also really powerful.
No, this is perfect for me, because like this is the first thing that I now check in the morning, because I have to know who I have to tackle today on Slack to say, look, come on, please, at least we have to move out of draft. So then in the end, like that we can start to implement it. So this makes it really powerful. But to show what we can do is like, so we have our Flight Booked event here, and here you can already see like we assigned it to different kind of workspaces, but I make it a little bit easier to see. So we assign different kind of workspaces where we want to have this event being in there. It might be that we now add another workspace here, which is, for example, for the marketing website. So it's more like our global PR, whatever kind of website. They don't book flights, so they don't really care. So for example, for them, we will not enforce them that they have to edit. But here are different kind of other airlines, and so we want to have it in here. And so I can edit here. The one thing, and I will already show, no, I will show it in a second. I will first show it how it goes down. So let's say, okay, lowest fare has already merged, so they already started to work, but let's have a quick look how it looks for them. Because the nice thing is I can create this now on my end. So we have a meeting. I mean, this is the good thing. So we have a meeting, we discuss this, we say everyone agrees, we want to have the standard. And now I have a next step that I can actually do something. So I created this Flight Booked here and made it available for everyone. It's not like I send around a document for please implement. So this is already actionable. And I think this is the essential part here, that we really make it actionable. So if we now quickly hop over to the lowest fare tracking plan. So they have their own space here. So they do their own thing. So there's a totally different kind of team, even sitting in a totally different kind of location. But now they basically inherit the Flight Booked from us, and we can see it here as well. So they already merged it in. This is like why we have it in our regular tracking plan. And they can immediately see, okay, this comes basically from the global organization. And so we have to implement it in this kind of way. So if they also inherit all the event properties that we have set on the global event space, and they also inherit all the different kind of rules that we have set there. So we can here basically really manage our standards that are minimal requirements. What they, of course, can do, they can go in and add some other properties that are important for them. It still stays a global event, but now it has some local flavors to them. And we also have some other different local flavors. So I want to show you one example. So we see here the origin airport code. And we want to ensure really high data quality. So if we look at the same thing on the global side, here we have it. So here we basically allow that these different kind of airports can be sent from there, because like this is where the whole group is operating from. This airline here just operates from these two airports.
This is
And
really important from my perspective. Like this is a game changer from a data structure documentation perspective.
yes,
Just to call that out for everyone that's listening and is thinking what is important in this demo, it's this pushing out to the subsidiaries, and it's this. And then one more thing with the event variants. Sorry, Timo, continue.
No, I come to the event variants in a second. So why is it so important? Because in the end, from my experience, if you really want to ensure speed and quality, you have to have good possibilities to have rules to check things. And it's not that we want to prevent things, we want to check things. We want to have things showing up in the inspector telling us, look, there's a problem. And the possibilities before, in this case, would be like, because it's not possible, because like, so you always come back to the common ground, and so you enable everything. Here we now have, for the first time, the possibility to grow granular on a local level, and this makes it so powerful. So this is one new possibility that you have. So we basically give this down to all our local departments, but we give them the possibility to even go beyond that, what we already did. And coming to the variants, so let's have a look here. We have two types of flights. So we have a round trip and we have a one-way. And you have this in a lot of different kind of situations that, so for example, you can have a song started when you're Spotify in a playlist, or you can have a song started from a sidebar or from down there. So people did crazy things to cover this. So either they introduced an event for each of these. Always like, so this makes a lot of stuff harder downstream, because like you have to aggregate them and then they are not really properly implemented. So my common theme for everyone is like, try to bring similar things together. But it was problematic because like I have different kind of properties depending on where this is. And round trip in one way, of course, is the same thing. So if we go into round trip, so round trip now is a variant of flight booked.
And it's worth calling out here. I think that means that this is just a label in Avo that it's the round trip variant, but the event is still sent as just flight booked.
That's correct. And what we can do here is, for example, first of all, we can describe it differently. We can give different kind of context, and we can then use something here, which is, for example, inbound flight number, inbound departure. We can require this for the round trip, but for, let's say, the one-way trip, it's not really relevant. So, and we can say this as always send. So this was a possibility that was, so before we always said like sometimes send, because we couldn't establish standards. And I think like what the new release really does is like, it gives us more possibilities to establish standards and to just check them. And again, like for me, checking things automatically was the best introduction ever, because like no one has to go through a sheet anymore and check, okay, is it right or is it wrong? And this is even more crazy if you try to do this in a spreadsheet, because you have to have the context. Okay, in this event, I think it's okay. In the other one, not. And so, but here we centralize the decisions that we make in the end into code, and the code checks it. And so this makes the variant, I think, really powerful. So as you can see here, we don't have the inbound property as a must here. It's not even mentioned here. So we don't expect it when someone is booking a one-way flight. We don't expect this to happen. In the other case, we expect it. And again, like it's the same event. We just introduced new rules to do all this.
Nice, thank you.
This is like the fastest fly over all this, what you can do. But no, it's like, this is like, but again, this makes it so powerful. Okay.
Yeah. All right. We are technically 4 minutes over time, but that's the reason people schedule 15-minute slots. It's because so that you can go 10 minutes over. That's why. I think. No, I'm kidding. But thank you all so much for joining us here today, and thank you, Timo, for having a pleasurable conversation as always. Timo, this was fun.
First of all, thank you for building this. So
Yeah.
I had really
Oh,
one challenging product 1.5 years ago, and I was always like, this is the stuff that I want to have. And I think this was the first time where we talked about it. And I mean, it's amazing. It didn't really take long to arrive there, because like these kind of stuff is not easy to build, also like easy to think about, but now it's there. So I think it will unlock really, really interesting stuff.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's easy to think about. It's not easy to build.
No, I mean, this is a
And
nice thing when you're outside, you just throw it over the fence and say, hey, it would be cool to have it. And I don't have to think about how to implement it. I just want to have it. And please do it well. So
yeah, exactly. And I think that's a strong passion that we have at Avo, is craftsmanship and building a product that people love using. And this is just the beginning of our big vision for 2024, which is around global governance with domain ownership, which is helping people fulfill their vision towards the data mesh principles. Which again, not everyone specifically has a vision of fulfilling the data mesh principles, but I think we can all align behind. We want some sort of federated governance, which is one of the principles. We want domain-oriented ownership. We want people and teams to be able to run on their own. We want self-serve data in some way, with some limitations. And to me, that also means extending that to self-serve governance of the data. And then we want everyone to treat the data as a product. And I think that's the most important thing as well for all of this. And so global governance with domain ownership, more to come. We already got a question from the audience around.
There's a very important question. So when is it released? Is it available yet?
Event variants are already available in general availability, and so are global requirements. For global requirements, you need to reach out to the team to set that up for you, and it's because that's typically for very large organizations, and but we will be happy to help you with that. And we already have people using all of these things every day, and so that makes us very happy. And event variants are just, we told people about that, and people just came running towards us like we had hot pancakes. It was so exciting. And so that was really fun. And so both of these are already live, so you can go and check them out in Avo. And please reach out to me and Timo, either on LinkedIn or Twitter, or we are also via email. If we want to share our email somewhere, you can find them on, I guess, the LinkedIn page for this event. We can't wait to continue the conversation, and we'll probably be here bugging you somewhere online soon. Right, Timo?
Yes, I think so.
Anything you want to leave the audience with before we end?
Just relieve yourself and do automated testing. So testing is, I think, like to really control. And honestly, so I mean, yeah. So just try it out. So it makes stuff so much easier if you have immediate feedback when something is implemented. Is this in the right way or not? And so you immediately get an indicator, right or wrong. So this makes your life so much easier. And
nice. Plus one on that, add some automation to your data processes. And if you want to learn more about when the upcoming Avo stuff is coming out, you can always go to our website and subscribe to our newsletter. I think we have a subscribe button both on our blog and also on avo.app/learn. And follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. That's where we release our stuff. And we will see you all on the internet. Thank you again so much for joining us, Timo. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and thank you, everyone, for being with us here today.
Great day to everyone.